Hey YouTube, Tyler here with the KingdomsTCG. I want to thank you for spending your precious time and clicking on this video. In today's video, I'm going to be continuing the lead up to the tournament that's going to be going on this Saturday, July 20th, and giving you guys a breakdown of the number of players, how many players are playing with which kingdoms I think will perform the best, and the strengths and weaknesses of each kingdom, and also the cards that are going to be the chase cards throughout the night. Firstly, what I want to go over in this video is kind of the breakdown of the players that are in the tournament. I'm going to be throwing up some graphics on the screen so that way you guys can see. Firstly, I want to point out that when it comes to the original players, those are the ones that were at the very first tournament that I ever hosted, kind of unveiling the KingdomsTCG. You'll see that there was definitely a interest in the defensive mindset, and that's why there were 4 players playing with Estercrest. You'll see that there were 3 for Furbish and only 2 for Linford. The end of the night resulted in a Linford-Estercrest duel for the championship, if you will, and Estercrest ended up running away with it. Actually, in the final 4, there were 2 Estercrest players, 1 Linford and 1 Furbish. But one thing that you'll find that is interesting is when it comes to the new players, there is a spike in interest of the Linford Kingdom, and so I'll be curious to see when it comes to the pool play for all the new players, if Linford ends up running away with that pool and dominating a lot of the games that they're playing in. So when you add them all up together, you'll see that Linford and Estercrest has a pretty even representation for the night of the tournament, with Furbish not too far behind with 5 players. I'll be curious to see if over the night of the tournament, if there's a pretty even spread of wins and losses between all the kingdoms, or if only one or two of the kingdoms are going to run away with more victories rather than the other. The next thing I want to point out is that for all the original players, because they bought the original version of the game, but after I redrew all the artwork and a couple final things were changed to the cards, all those cards were no longer legal for tournament play. So they all had to buy a brand new deck. So as my way of saying sorry, but here's my way of making up for it, they each got to choose 18 cards that they wanted to add to modify their starter deck. And so they all had 18 cards. They could pick whatever cards they wanted, a bunch of copies or just a bunch of single cards. And so I broke it down into little pie charts, and it was interesting seeing how the different kingdoms, what they prioritized in their deck breakdown. You'll see for Estercrest that there was definitely a focus on battle cards, which is pretty general. It's a pretty common thing to see amongst any kingdom. You're going to be relying on battle cards, at least for this moment, with the only Estercrest, Furbish, and Linford being the only 3 kingdoms that are in the KingdomsTCG at this moment. One thing I will point out, though, is that 10% with the spirits, all Estercrest players requested that they have at least 1 or 2 spirit cards be added into their deck, and that's because Charlotte, who is a spirit card that Estercrest relies on as the strategy for Estercrest develops, they all wanted that card in their fortress. You also see that they did ask for some sacreds. That's just because that they rely on their sacreds to generate those good cards. Now going to Furbish, all the Furbish players, you'll see that there was a heightened ask, or there was a high ask for battle cards because they need them. Furbish does not have a lot of firepower, so a lot of those battle cards were actually neutral cards or the high costing expensive Furbish specific cards such as Temple Judge or the Light Warden. One thing that is interesting, though, is you will notice that there is a high percentage of spells. Because Furbish is a spell-oriented kingdom, they use a lot of Furbish spells, but also a lot of neutral spells. So it was kind of interesting seeing all the Furbish players ask for more spells than both the Estercrest and the Linford kingdoms. Lastly, going to the Linford pie chart, I will say that this chart is a little bit skewed because it is only based off of one person, because the other people did not request for the 18 cards. And so typically what you would see is a lower percentage in the spells category and a greater percentage in the battle cards category. And that's particularly because just Linford was built so well that its spells almost can kind of slow down the heartbeat of the strategy when it comes to Linford, because Linford's battle cards have such good abilities and effects that if you have a spell card, you're almost kind of paying the cost of not having that battle card and potentially slowing down your strategy. Now I want to go over 5 cards that I believe will be the chase cards throughout the night. As people are playing in pool play, they're going to see things that are driving them nuts, or they're going to see a card that they want as well in their deck. And these are the 5 cards that I think people are going to be chasing after. The first card, and I'll put it up on the screen, is Time Scribe. Time Scribe, basically what it does is once it's in the graveyard, during your opponent's attack phase, you can send it from the graveyard to the Forgotten to immediately end your opponent's attack phase and end their turn completely. This card will be perfect for people if they're simply just trying to buy themselves an extra turn to try to stay in the game, or they're just getting tired of getting beat down from Linford or from Estercrest or from Furbish, whatever kingdom they're playing against, and they just want some way to stop it. The next card is Southern Signal. Southern Signal is a token that costs 6 to play, so it's a little expensive and it gives you 0 magicka. But the thing that is enticing about it is the fact that if you play a battle card to the field and there's a copy of it in the graveyard, you can free play that copy as well. What's amazing about that is if you play a vanilla battle card, it's okay. But if you play a battle card that has an effect or an ability, then it just becomes that much better, because that effect can resolve twice now, or that ability, rather than just being on 1 card, is now on 2 cards. And so I can see people really wanting to have Southern Signal in their deck to be one of their tokens that they're using. Next is the Sacred the Library. I won't read the whole thing, but in short, you get to draw 10 cards, and the card then explains how to get rid of those other cards. People will see this card and they will immediately think that this is a card digging machine, that you're going to be able to draw 10 cards and basically you'll have no limits at that point. The library can be dangerous though. If you don't build around it properly, you can actually end up kind of messing yourself up and costing you the game potentially. But nonetheless, I can see people wanting this card and they'll see it as a means to just get that many more cards in their hand to hopefully speed up their gameplay faster than their opponent. The next card that I think people are going to be chasing after is Incinerate, which is a cost 8 spell, which simply allows you to destroy a battle card or legend. I think what will happen throughout the night, especially for pool play, because once they're in the tournament, they can't add any new cards into their deck. They will see cards that are starting to drive them nuts, especially because there are multiple people representing Estercrest, Linford, and Furbish. People are bound to see a card more than once from a different player, and they are going to get sick and tired of seeing that card because they have no way of outing it, and this spell will give them the answer to that problem. It does cost a lot, so people will kind of find out, is it worth having 1 in the deck? Is it okay having 2 or 3? But nonetheless, I think people will want a card like this just because it straight up gets rid of a battle card or legend. And lastly, a card that I think people will be going after. It is a card that I have covered in a previous video, but it is the spell Written Law. As the game develops, as more cards come out, there will be other things that are more predominant in the game. But at the moment, the abilities Silence X, I should say, Rage, and Defensive can be very annoying. They can be scary depending on what side of the table you are on. And while people are in pool play, they're going to get annoyed by the abilities. And so once they find out that there's a card that they can use to get rid of those abilities, people are going to be prancing. Once people find out that there is a card that can get rid of those abilities that have been driving them nuts all tournament, all pool play, they are going to want to pounce on that and get that in their fortress as soon as they can. And now lastly, I want to go over kind of my prediction for the night and how I think each kingdom is going to function. But first, I'm going to put a visual up on the screen. I did a breakdown of what I believe to be the best representation of the best sacred phases for each of the kingdoms. You will see that Linford starts out super strong, in my opinion, for phase 1 and progressively gets worse, but that does not mean that they are horrible. It's just a lot of their power comes in phase 1 and phase 2. Estercrest starts out pretty good in phase 1, but once they get to phase 2, they do a pretty solid job, and if they can maintain that board presence, they don't drop down too much. Furbish, you will see, though, starts out fairly weak. They are pretty bad Sacred Phase 1 Kingdom, but if they can get all the way to Sacred Phase 3 and have what they need to do what they need to do, they can be a pretty unbeatable kingdom. And now to kind of break down my final thoughts, and I apologize for not looking at the screen or at the camera constantly. I have my notes typed out on my phone. I want to make sure I'm relaying that to you exactly how I have it typed out. So when it comes to Linford, Basically, they are going to be relying on a first turn Lancer, because Lancer will start getting their engine going, looking for cards, generating Magicka, and generating fast attacks and heavy attacks. Especially if they can search out frontmen or get frontmen out on the field, or get Hawk, which can give Lancer rage. It's going to start generating them that Magicka bonus that they need to play their more powerful cards, and also just getting those fast and early attacks onto their opponent before their opponent can get any of their things going. Their strengths are definitely that they are fast-paced and they have great deck cohesion. Probably out of the 3 kingdoms, the best deck cohesion in the game. Their only downside, their weakness, is that they have very low health, and so therefore they can't maintain a good board presence. Sure, there's cards like Caravan Horse that can help Linford players maintain a good board presence, but sometimes you wonder, does putting that card in your fortress slow down your fast-paced strategy? Now, for the Kingdom of Estercrest, people that are going to be playing with that kingdom, they're going to be relying on 2 things if they want to have any chance at success in the night. They're going to be relying on their sacreds, and it'll be pivotal in which sacred they choose and which phase they choose to put it in, and also getting cards out in the field and in the graveyard. When they can get them on the field, they are building a wall that is very difficult to get over, and when they're getting cards in the graveyard, they know that there's going to be a way to get them back to the field. Their weakness is the fact, though, that they are very slow paced. There's no card draw. There's no card search. So each card draw, if it's not the card that they need, it's painful. Every time they put a card on the field and it goes to the graveyard, even though there is a way to get it back, it's painful because it took time. Unlike Furbish and Linford, where they can generate fast plays, Estercrest takes its time. And lastly, when it comes to Furbish, if Furbish wants to have any chance at winning in the tournament, they're going to rely on Furbish Temple Judge and their spells. Furbish Temple Judge is a very good card, and after playing with it quite some time now, maybe unfair, but Furbish needs anything that it can take to hopefully get that W over their opponents. Basically, their strength is Sacred Phase 3. If they can get to Sacred Phase 3, they're going to be operating to its fullest capacity, because hopefully by the time they get to Sacred Phase 3, they have tokens out. Council Board Member, which is their searcher card, will be able to be the best searcher in the game at that moment, because any battle card that they revealed can be played for free, which can turn into some pretty incredible plays. Their only weakness is that that's a very risky strategy. The moment you get to in the Sacred Phase 3, it's just a matter of counting down time, counting down the health until you are at 0. So you need to make sure that if you are a Furbish player, that you have everything set in place before you are entering into Sacred Phase 3. Lastly, to kind of wrap up this video, I'll give my final prediction of which kingdom I think is going to end up winning the whole entire tournament, and I believe it's going to be Linford. I think Linford was the best made kingdom out of the 3 kingdoms, and I think Linford just is the kingdom that always seems to have an answer for any problem that is put at it. I do think there's a chance for Estercrest, however, and I am hoping for Furbish that maybe someone can whip out a good deck combination to kick some butt. I guess with that, I want to thank you guys for clicking on this video. Please like and subscribe. Links will be below for the Instagram and Facebook, where you can keep updated on what's going on for the KingdomsTCG. There will also be links in the description below for the game store, where you can get your access, or get your hands on, I should say, to the 3 starter decks of Estercrest, Furbish, and Linford. And with that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, night, day, whenever you're watching this video. Thanks for watching.